BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, and this one might be a little bit controversial, but no one else is going to talk about it but me, because I tried to be the Beyblade YouTuber that kind of doesn't rely on lazy analysis, and I don't want to make another video that comes across way too late before someone else comes up with the idea. And this is something I had on my mind for a couple of months now, so I want to keep making Beyblade content until I get to 1,000 subs anyway. And I feel like this one is a conversation I feel like you guys would be pretty interested in talking about with me. Now, I've talked before on why the metal versus burst debate lacks nuance, especially since in a metal contextual sense, the metal saga's goal was to potentially achieve a peaceful world of Beyblade that burst kind of for the most part works in. Yes, in burst you are going to have those antagonists trying to upstage the status quo in some seasons, but not every person has a personal reason to use Beyblades as a metaphor for their own issues and insecurities. So I think this discussion is going to have a bit more nuance, because honestly neither one or 100% are bad at this, but there are aspects of the metal saga's battle royales that they excel in that they lack when it comes to their team battles, and it's vice versa with burst, where their tag battles are actually pretty good, but their battle royales tend to be a little bit lacking. And I can basically tell you guys what makes one work and what makes the other does not work as much. So before we begin, I actually want you all to do a few things. Well, besides like or subscribe, since telling people to do that actually works. First, tell me, what are your favorite battle royales from the Metal and Burst Saga? Second, tell me, what are your favorite tag team battles from the Metal and Burst Saga? And 3, tell me, which characters would you like to see team up in a tag battle that never happened? Now, the first battle royale in Metal isn't the Stormy one. It's the first one between Benkei, Kenta, Hikaru, and Yu, because it plays on the three of them knowing each other and trying to attack before Yu activates a special move, and it gives you just enough anticipation to ask what just happened when Jinga, Kyoya, and Madoka found him, at least for an introduction episode to a new rival and threat. Then we get Kyoya, Jinga, and Madoka versus Yu, where Yu's special moves counter and start to weaken Kyoya's performance tip so bad, so Madoka puts the ultimate clutch play and does what Yu did and figures out how to find the opening to disrupt it so Kyoya can see the damage, and she got fourth place. You all put some respect on Madoka fudging Amato's name, because without her, your GOAT would have been cooked. Leaving Jinga to try and figure out how to beat Yu, actually doing pretty well after seeing from what Kyoya could do. Then there's one people don't talk about, the Road to Battle Blade. There's finally Battle Royale, where we get a clash between Hyoma clashing with Hikaru, Osamu Takashi and Akira eliminating Tetsuya of all people, Kyoya versus Benkei versus Kenta, and Jinga ending the fight with Star Blast attack. It's just a quick but fun acknowledgement that while everyone's going their separate ways, they're all united by their friendship, or at least in Tetsuya begrudging respect, and we'll meet again when most of them make it to Battle Bladers. And now we can talk about the Stormy Battle Royale, because I barely hear about how great this fight is. It's a clash between 6 people playing with all the dynamics. You got Yu and Tsubasa arguing over who gets to take on Jinga, Kyoya helping Jinga fight both of them off so Jinga can focus on Tsubasa, Kenta and Hyoma tag teaming Yu, Tsubasa and Yu teaming up to divide and conquer with Kenta's conflicting feelings almost kicking out until Kyoya comes in for the save, and Hyoma versus Tsubasa outplaying each other until Hyoma gets eliminated. Kenta and Kyoya are able to do some damage to Yu, but it's Yu's TikTok brain that gets upset Tsubasa's dealing Jinga that leads to them just turning on each other. Because yes, if they do focus on trying to take each other out, they're just making themselves weaker and harder to take out Jinga or any of her surviving friends. But who cares? It's fun. And then we get Jinga using his battle for Miyutaro to use full power to create a vacuum, causing a 3-way knockout, which normally would let him be the victor, but Kyoya and Kenta survive the impact, resulting in Kyoya being too fast for Kenta's counterattack and win. Kyoya won by being the smartest blader, which means technically he did beat Jinga again, and yet no one talks about that or acknowledges that. This is the part where I talk about what a good battle royale should do. It should bring out every character who's participating, use the dynamics at full display, shift around who's fighting who, instead of just making everything a series of separate 1v1s and calling it a battle royale, and plays on the fact that you can basically make any ally or enemy in the middle of a fight. Now, I'm hesitant to call the New York City Civil War battle between the teams that are good and the teams that are working for Hades Inc. a battle royale, because that's just a series of allies working together in different parts of the city, but that doesn't exactly fit the criteria of a team battle either. It has elements of both, and I think what it does well is put the pressure on the heroes, but I think it works because of how many players are just involved trying to help one another out, especially when Wild Fang comes in later for the save. And one of the more underappreciated aspects are the Destroyer Dome battles. In Group A, you've got the Garcias, who tricked the heroes into thinking they would have a civil war, Toby and Zio, Tsubasa, the return of Tobio of all people, and 2 randos. with Enzo and Selen selling the idea of the Garcia Civil War to the point that they actually earned the audience's sympathy. Tsubasa versus Tobio, Selen getting KO'd, Tobi and Zio coming in for the save only for Enzo to backstab them to weaken their stamina, and Selen tricking them since only 3 people can reach the finals. But when Tsubasa finishes off Tobio, Tsubasa goes to almost defeat Argo when Enzo sacrifices himself to save his big brother, and then when Argo and Ian team up to clip Eagle's wings, Tobi and Zio come in clutch, resulting in a clash between 3 and 2 special moves. You see what I mean? They take advantage of every single blader to make something special. Then in Group B, you've got Masamune, King, and Jack actually proving he does have some power with the arrangement provided as long as he tapped into it working naturally. All of Team Lavushka and Masamune's friends in Team Dungeon he tries to keep out of the damage from King. You got Jack eliminating Brad, only to get knocked out to hype up Jigsaw's power, and then take over as the main antagonist of the fight, using his invisibility to screw with the rest of the cast and to play on the missed opportunity from the second season. Remember how Lyra never got a chance to fight in the tournament for Metal Masters? Well, while I criticized Alexi for not having a proper special move that didn't require cheating, at least he and Oguma fought and had their special moves. Lyra didn't, and this time, Lyra was able to use her special move, Acid Needle, after Alexi's able to guide his team to find Alexi's, Jigsaw's location, which picks off Jigsaw so much that he decides to nuke the entire stadium with only King and Masamune able to survive. And hey, my autocorrect on my laptop finally managed to make it spell Masamune correctly, and it just changed Masamune to Mesomonic. I hate my life. And that's what I'm talking about with these battle royales. You can use any character, so even if you don't like or don't get that much to do in unique and creative ways, since Masamune and King are going to get more fleshed out with their friendship and rivalry when they move on to the final round, it gives us the opportunity to see what Jack's been up to see Team Lavushka's intelligence when they're not cheating, and that even a no-name person that wasn't a legendary blader like Jigsaw can still be a threat with the right blade and abilities in the world. Even the fate of Chris had a good dynamic since everyone's trying to sway Chris to join, with King challenging Chris after Lada disrespected Masamune, Jinga fighting to get King to chill out, Johannes bribing Chris so Balin Fisk gets involved, with Yuki trying to fight Aguma, Tobi and Zio versus Bao, Chris going after Jinga and dodging King, and Jinga's allies blocking Balin from interfering. Then when Jinga, King, and Chris are all going to clash, Ryuga shows up trying to steal Chris's power, Johannes pissing off Ryuga, and Aguma causing them to retreat. Everyone's angry at each other, and it's all just one hilarious mess. But let's move on to Burst and see how they excel when it comes to team battles, or tag team battles. Starting from Season 3 of Burst, we do get a fair number of tag battles, and while Chozi's was a little rough, it did a better job of showing intentionally everyone just kind of sucks at working together besides Fubuki and maybe Kyle and John. Because Suo intentionally sabotages Ranjiro to get a cheap hit on Sean's Excalibur, only for it to destabilize Ragnarok's Typhoon and make it easier for Sean to burst Ranjiro's blade. And Kyle hits Sean's Beyblade to ensure Buster Excalibur's layers align, so it's easier for Sean to use Pentasaber to burst Suo, or Fifth Impact. Though I'm not as much of a fan of Aiga and Fubuki versus Laban and Hoey, because Hoey's eliminated after him and Aiga just break off the fight. But Fubuki saving Aiga from Vice Leopard's howling bite by ramming Achilles from behind to slam them both into the wall was actually pretty clever. GT is where things really get great because Drum and Delta have spent the season with Delta being against Drum out of envy and jealousy due to Drum seemingly being favored by Vault, only to end up being saved by him and losing Diabolos before Vault gets him on the right track. So in their tag battle, not only do Drum and Delta do a better job working together to get rid of Arthur, but when Gwyn goes out on the tag, Delta sacrifices himself to pour all of his remaining power into Drum's dragon to keep them in the game after reminiscing about all the times Drum was there for him, culminating in these beautiful shots entrusting Drum to survive and win the battle to reach Gwyn. The only problem I have with GT and how they handled its team battles is that Drum and Amane never got to team up in a battle. Though Amane got his solo run back later and Drum wanted to work with Amane, but Amane was the one who made the decision to let Drum and Delta do it together for the final tag battle anyway. And then we get to Sparking, which thanks to the team nature of the majority of the season had for a lot of signs for both teams actually trying to work together and not playing the other team strategies. You had the Twins having to use Twin Strike to beat the Kiyama's Double Tornado. You had Hikaru and Rentaro trying to make Drum and Louis sabotage each other, only for Louis to help Drum's dragon reach their awakening. Even Aiga and Hikaru working together to weaken the barrier, only for Hyuga's obsession with beating Aiga sabotaging Lane's efforts, resulting in both brothers KO'd, and Aiga using momentum to knock Lucifer out of the stadium. Rantaro sacrificing himself to take on Vault to save Cisco from Brave Sword and going, "I leave the rest to you." Cisco, so Cisco can try to finish up Free on his own as he uses Glide Tornado offensively for a double burst, which is one of the sickest things Rentaro has ever done, and the only reason people hate on it is the idea of Rentaro being able to tie with Vault, which is something seriously people never would have thought was possible back in Season 1 or 2. You even have Free and Louis versus Vault and Hugo, where the two obviously have the power advantage, but Vault pushes Hugo to live up to his potential, and they only win because Vault sacrifices himself to give Hugo the rush in power to knock Fafnir and Lognius out. You can't even call it plot armor since Louis and Free's blades didn't even have the momentum to use their special move, while Vault literally gave Hugo his Beyblade's momentum for his Beyblade to use. At least to me, a good tag battle should show off the protagonists or main characters of the battle working together, because or in spite of their relationship against a partnership whose cooperation, even if it isn't completely in sync, is enough of a threat that they have to combine, fuse, alter, or have their skills play off each other, instead of it just feeling like 1v1s happening side by side. I think two good examples of this, one of which might surprise you, is Hyuga and Hikaru's battle against Cisco and Free. In almost a test of sorts, Free and Cisco lured the twins into a false sense of security, using Fafnir as bait until Free uses its rubber to send Cisco Citan to hit Helios and force it into the limit break, so they can activate the attack as their joint special move, putting Hikaru and Hyuga on the back foot. Then Hikaru comes in with a clutch play using his new move Volcano Bound. He has Helios use his bound bar to bounce off Fafnir and accelerate towards Citan and perform a mutual KO. And next to the damage Hikaru and Hyuga did earlier to Free, Hyuga can activate his limit break to push Fafnir to a stadium out. It's a fight where even if I think Cisco could have been used a little bit more and not a lot of special moves are used, it's more strategic focused and hype moments forced. The best example comes from one of my favorite fights, Cisco and Free versus Drum and Louie. Drum and Louie's plan is simple: have Dragon's Awakening and Speed overwhelm and eventually outpace Cisco, since while he's the weakest one there, and Louie stops Free from going into help. Then the Cool Boys fight back with Free using Lognius' momentum to push the Nothing Tip so Fafnir can accelerate, but Cisco uses his roll of defense to send Tempest Dragon into the Storm Plate, flying up for Free to knock him out with Nothing Break. Then Louis jumps into Burst Citan, but Free gets Louis laser focused so hard, Cisco is able to charge up Universe Drift fast enough to blast them both out of the stadium and be the last one standing. It's got the teamwork, hype moments, and chess match outmaneuvering the other with Flashy Sakuga. So, now that we talked about what makes Metal's Battle Royales and Burst's team battles good, it's time to talk about what makes Metal's team battles and Burst's Battle Royales fall shorter. So, here's a question for you guys. How many joint special moves are there in the Metal Saga? Well, there's Triple Orso Step by the Kamade Brothers, and 3 Kamade Brothers Attack, Carte and Zidon's Crow Crusher, Sophie and Wales Grand Decalion, Selen and Enzo's Double Sunjog Driver, The Shine and Chiyun's Heaven Supreme Destruction Bomb, Toby and Zio's Double Stream Typhoon, King and Masamune's King of Flash of Lightning Thunder Sword. Is that it? Now, here's another question. How many of those belong to protagonists or are used by them? If we are talking main protagonists, the answer is 1, and if we're just talking about heroic allies at best, that's only 3 out of confirmed 8 joint special moves, which you'd think would be more common in a show where the Beyblades are powered by constellations, which are multiple stars aligning to form a shape. And that brings me to one of the problems that I have with the team battles. At least when it comes to the protagonist teaming up against 2 other people with a teammate, there's barely any teamwork between said protagonists. And I don't mean because there's like no joint special moves between like anyone in the main cast of season 1 or 2, or the fact that this fight matches being having Jinga and Masamune fight as well as Yu and Tsubasa team up twice. There's barely any synergy in some of their fights. For example, I don't hate Jinga and Masamune versus Nal and Kyoya. The eternal rivals were weakened and the two realized they were going to have to work together, resulting in both of them diving down with their special moves to try and hit Nal's Bay before Mystic Zone could even be charged, before the two's glorified 1v1 until the end. But, you know, that's the issue. Tsubasa and Yu versus Benkei and Demura might be one of the more underappreciated battles from the Metal Saga. Let me know if you want a video about that. And credit for Team Wildfang for not screwing up normally and actually baiting them into a battle where Demura's Scorpion can bypass Libra's Sand and use both to strike and stop Tsubasa from escaping, resulting in Tsubasa having to go berserk. So, what's the problem? There's no proper attempt at teamwork between Tsubasa and Yu. Yu tries using Sandbuster, which Benkei and Demura counter, and then Tsubasa goes berserk and then just nukes everybody but the audience. Yes, I know I keep saying Sandbuster when it's Sonic Buster, but you know what I mean. And it doesn't help against Excalibur with Tsubasa and Yu's second match. Yu doesn't get to do too much but babysit Tsubasa's dark side to make sure he doesn't go berserk until Tsubasa is able to overcome the darkness. I'm not going to be negative and say that he didn't do anything because, you know, you reaching out to Tsubasa is important. When you look at it from a battle choreography perspective, he's the only character in the 22-minute episode where they're battling out of the 4 contestants that does not use a special move. And this problem gets even worse in Fury. Now, I know I'm going to get a bunch of people that blame this on Yuki, but a similar problem happens when Jinga and Yuki fight Wang Huzhong twice. Jinga doesn't have a special move yet, while Yuki only has his one and is still struggling with battle experience. Meanwhile, Mei Mei and Chao Shin have not only worked in tandem well before, but also have multiple special moves, but they are essentially just using their weaker ones, and neither one has a variety to make special moves or take advantage of the stadium. Ironically, Jinga and Yuki versus Bao and Aguma fixes better by having Yuki disable Bao for a while and trap him rubbled under rocks and debris to counter Aguma's exploding fist, only for Bao to re-emerge and stop Jinga, allowing Aguma to finish them all off before Jinga can use Katsuko Tornado, but that's a rarity. Compared to Burst for tag team battles, it's either scenarios where one team has the actual teamwork going on, both teams are struggling with them just treating it as 2 1v1 battles until the end, or because it's time for one character to get a development, they do more of the work in the battle. I'd say Masamune, Jinga, and Yu versus Excalibur is a good team battle because of how it goes. Yu tries using Sonic Buster, but the Twin Jewels use their special move to completely drain his stamina. So Masamune clears the path for Jinga to get through their joint special move, but Julian's waiting for them to crush them under Black Excalibur. But the weirdest part is that despite being 4 seasons, I set a sync for a lot of the main characters. It's weird that they don't team up in fights unless it's in a battle royale, where ironically there's more teamwork. We had a super team of 3 fan favorites from Fusion and Masters, and they don't even play with the scenarios. Like, I would love to see a fight where Yu and Masamune have to team up, or Jinga and Tsubasa come to combine their talent and skill. At least Kenta and Benkei did something with customizing their Beyblades back in Season 1. But, like, we had a whole season built on an 18 tournament battle, and none of the protagonists had, like, a joint special move for it. And even then, when compared to Burst didn't have a lot of joint special moves either, but when they did, it was pretty impactful, and even when they didn't try, they would still have the character use a special move to bounce off of each other like they did and what we talked about earlier. But Burst falters in battle royales, and here's why. Anytime there's a 3v1, you already know the outcome of the fight. Vault, Kuza, and Dyna versus Red Eye, you know who wins that. Renru versus Vault, Kuza, and Rentaro, you know who's going to win that. I'd say Aiga, Ranjiro, and Fubuki versus Louis is the best battle because they came in with a strategy and executed as well as they could, but Louis is just far above them at the time. Let me explain what the problem is with Burst's Battle Royale, since it's become more of a problem by the time we get to Season 3 and until Season 1, I was going to say 6, but doesn't necessarily go away. See, whenever there's a Battle Royale in Burst, after a certain point, if that main person is the antagonist or the central character, the battle is going to be catered to only for them to shine. And after Season 3, because most of the episodes are reduced down to 11 episodes, the fights are not only shorter, so they last less time for any character to have these interactions or shifting alliances and opponents more frequently compared to Metal. And after the episodes being cut down to 11 minutes, the fights are not only shorter, so they last for less time than if the characters have some interactions or shifting alliance and opponents more frequently compared to Metal. I talked about this before, but I'm not the biggest fan of the 9-way battle royale in episode 20 because this is a battle that takes place late in the second half of the episode, and it just have 5 use the Dark Resonance to make 6 people out of the opposing 8 bladers destroyed. So there's no time for any fun dynamics or any in-between battles, and then Aiga and Fubuki just got blown away later. It's a Lane versus Hikaru versus Louis versus Cisco versus Drum, where similar to Fi, and that Lane just defeats all 4 of them at once, but at least this time he actually uses a special move that pushes people away, but we actually never get to see like the characters trying to counter one another using the special moves to battle each other, which may have been to save on the budget going for future battles when there's a lot more choreography they can use, but it's still a bummer, and you know how Beyblade fans like to yell plot armor whenever there's unsatisfying fights. The next battle royale with Aiga versus Free versus Vault versus Hyuga and Rentaro was mostly better because Aiga just drains almost everyone's stamina with the Infinite Shield, but there's some injury and inquiry on how to fight is going to go because despite having 2 stamina types, Hyuga's actually able to tap into his inner potential to barely win the round. And while it's still just a short fight, at least there's more intrigue about who gets to win, since Aiga just debuted his fight, so you think he would be the one that gets to win. Cho-Z wasn't awful at this with Laban and Fi's introduction, both having them defeat two enemies that want to show off their strength. But I think that's easier since it's only 3 people getting involved in the fight. Heck, the Hoei versus Aiga versus Suo battle was interesting because Aiga was the first that one eliminated, and Hoei and Suo never had a 1v1 before, so we didn't know who was going to win. If I wanted to give a good example of a fight done well, I would say Dynamite's battle actually didn't do this too terribly. The Ilya fight was an introduction, but Ilya's victory came from good strategy and mental manipulation, tricking Granzo into going into high mode to waste stamina for a stronger special move in Ragnarok Typhoon, double Cyclone, to weaken Basara, so Basara goes out to Bell and Rashad before finishing off the Portuguese champion, and when Bell and Rashad are distracted fighting each other, Ilya goes to finish them off at the same time. Now, if I had no media literacy and just called any character to use their intelligence and brain to overcome obstacles a cheater, I would say this was a bad thing, but because I try not to honor stupidity, I think this is a better example of what Burst should have done. So, what are my final thoughts on this? I would say in general, Metal and Burst tag team and battle royales had a lot of potential and hype moments, but in Metal's case, they should have incorporated what they did in the battle royales into the tag team battles by allowing the characters to have more strategic use of their abilities and working together with one partner. Even using the special moves to complement one another, even if they're not making a joint special move, like what we saw in GT and Sparking, would be a benefit. In Burst's case, I would say they just need more battles that weren't obvious about who was going to win, and take notes from what Metal did and not only have the more time in for the fights, but also play around with who's willing to work a fu, shifting strategies on the fly, whether or not some characters are in character, what special moves that would interact with one another, and just have fun with it. But these are all my opinions. I'll leave the floor to you guys. Thanks for watching, and BIP of Bizarre Productions. I am so worried about the recording and screenshot number I'm going to have to make tonight. I'm scared, but signing off.